The alert pierced through Watchmaster Valis's afternoon nap like a knife. His 4 eyes snapped open and he almost knocked over his cup of lukewarm stim juice. "What in the 7 moons?" he grumbled, his tentacles flying across the control panel. The massive display screen lit up, showing a red dot where there shouldn't be one. "Computer, analyze the vessel," Valis commanded, straightening his uniform. The wrinkles would have to wait. "Unable to match configuration to known databases," the AI responded in its annoyingly calm voice. "Hull composition, unknown. Energy signature, unknown. Weapons systems, unable to determine." Valis felt his skin patches turn pale blue, the Zorvani equivalent of going white with fear. In 30 years of watching this sector, he'd never seen a completely unidentifiable ship. "Get me Admiral Kraz," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The Admiral's hologram appeared, looking just as sleepy as Valis had been moments ago. "This better be good, Watchmaster." "Sir, we have an intruder. Big one, and—" Valis swallowed hard. "We can't identify anything about it." The ship on the screen was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Pitch black against the stars, it looked like someone had taken a bite out of space itself. Its hull was smooth, almost organic-looking, with no visible weapons, which somehow made it even more terrifying. Before the Admiral could respond, the mysterious vessel broadcast a message. The words appeared on every screen in the command center, and Valis felt his third heart skip a beat. "You are trespassing. Identify yourself." Valis barely had time to process the ominous message flashing across his screen before alarms blared across the command center. The unknown vessel remained motionless, waiting. Tension hung thick in the air as every officer turned to him for orders. Steeling himself, Valis took a deep breath. Protocol dictated a response, and it had to be immediate. "Sir, we have an intruder. Big one, and—" Valis swallowed hard. "It matches nothing in our records." Admiral Kraz's hologram flickered as he leaned forward. "Nothing? Impossible. Fire a warning shot. Standard protocol." Valis's tentacles trembled slightly as he gave the order. "Squadron 6, execute warning pattern Delta. Show them the might of hegemony." 3 sleek Zorvani cruisers moved into formation, their purple-tinted engines glowing against the darkness of space. The lead ship fired a burst of energy that blazed past the mysterious vessel's bow. What happened next made Valis's 4 hearts skip several beats. The unknown ship, the Ares as they now knew it, responded with frightening speed. Before Valis could even blink, precise beams of brilliant blue light shot out from ports he hadn't even identified as weapons. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted, but it was too late. The beams struck Squadron 6's ships with surgical precision. No explosions. No destruction. Instead, their engines simply died. "Status report," Valis demanded, his voice cracking. "Squadron 6 reports complete power failure, sir. Life support only." His second-in-command's voice shook. They didn't even try to destroy us. They just turned us off." Admiral Kraz's hologram had gone very still. "Watchmaster, what are we dealing with?" Valis stared at his tactical display, watching as his mighty warships drifted helplessly in space. The realization hit him like a plasma bolt. "Sir, I believe we've made a terrible mistake. This is no primitive species testing our borders. Their technology, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered." "By the Ancient Ones," Kraz whispered. "How many ships do we have in range?" 23 capital ships, Admiral. But after what I just witnessed..." Valis's skin patches darkened with shame. "I don't believe it would matter if we had 100. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zorvani hegemony had ruled unchallenged for 1,000 years. They had crushed countless civilizations, absorbed dozens of species into their empire. But this was different. "Sir," a junior officer called out, her voice trembling. "The Ares is moving again." Valis watched as the mysterious ship glided forward with impossible grace, its hull seeming to drink in the light of nearby stars. It positioned itself directly between his command ship and the disabled Squadron 6. A message flashed across his screen. "Your warning shot has been noted." Our response was measured. "Do not test us again." Valis felt something he hadn't experienced since his academy days. Pure, unfiltered fear. Not just for himself, but for everything he'd ever known or believed about his people's place in the galaxy. As the Ares held its position, effortlessly disabling Squadron 6, Valis felt a cold realization settle in. This was no ordinary encounter. The implications were staggering. Across the sector, emergency beacons flared as the High Council demanded answers, and soon the fate of the hegemony would no longer rest in the hands of the military alone. In the Grand Chamber of Voices, hundreds of Zorvani counselors filled the tiered seating, their tentacles writhing with anxiety. The marble-like walls, usually gleaming with a soft bioluminescent glow, seemed dimmer today. Emergency sessions always dampened the living crystal's natural light. High Speaker Mira's voice echoed through the chamber. "The data is clear. This Ares vessel disabled 3 of our most advanced warships without suffering damage. Our weapons barely scratched their shields." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A military counselor named Drez pushed forward, his scales flushed dark purple with agitation. "We must respond with overwhelming force. The hegemony cannot appear weak." "Weak?" Mira's tentacles coiled tightly. "Did you not see the battle footage? Their targeting systems are generations ahead of ours. They predicted our attack patterns before our ships even moved." The chamber's crystal walls pulsed red as another counselor activated the emergency broadcast system. A young aide rushed in, nearly tripping over his ceremonial robes. "High Speaker, we're receiving reports and more ships, dozens of them. They're appearing all across the outer rim." The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors rose from their seats, tentacles gesturing wildly. The living crystal walls flashed chaotically, reflecting their collective anxiety. Admiral Kraz's hologram materialized in the center of the chamber. "The reports are accurate. We've confirmed 27 vessels of similar design to the Ares. They're maintaining position just outside our defense perimeters." High Speaker Mira raised all 4 arms, calling for silence. "What are their actions? Any hostile moves?" "No, High Speaker." Kraz's hologram flickered. "They're just waiting, watching. Each ship holds position precisely at the edge of our territorial boundaries. They're not advancing, but they're not retreating either." An elder counselor named Ven, his scales pale with age, spoke softly, but his words carried weight. "This is not the behavior of raiders or conquerors. This is a message. They're showing us their reach, their coordination." "Agreed," Mira said, her tentacles relaxing slightly. "This species, these humans, they're demonstrating their capabilities without initiating conflict. It's a diplomatic overture, albeit an intimidating one." The chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. The Zorvani hegemony, dominant power in this sector for centuries, had just met a civilization that could match, perhaps exceed, their military might. "We must convene the Contact Protocol Committee," Mira declared, "and this time, we will not approach as conquerors, but as equals." The living crystal walls pulsed a steady blue, reflecting the Council's shift from panic to purposeful action. For the first time in generations, the hegemony would have to learn the art of true diplomacy. The Council chamber was still ringing with heated debates when the emergency report came in. Admiral Kex's fleet had already mobilized. The decision, it seemed, had been made outside the halls of diplomacy. As Kex's warships tore through hyperspace, the Zorvani hegemony's true stance on diplomacy became painfully clear. The massive Zorvani battle fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 12 capital ships, their biometallic hulls gleaming under distant starlight, surrounded the lone human vessel. Admiral Kex's tentacles twitched with anticipation as he watched from the command center of his flagship. "Target locked," his weapons officer reported. The human vessel remained stationary. Open a channel, Kex ordered. His voice carried the authority of centuries of Zorvani military tradition. This is Admiral Kex of the Hegemony Defense Force. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning. Silence answered. They're not responding, Admiral. Kex's skin darkened with irritation. Launch fighters, all ships, weapons free. Show them the might of... The deck lurched violently beneath his feet. Warning signals blared throughout the command center as red emergency lights pulsed. Multiple impacts, his tactical officer shouted. The human ship. It's moving faster than our targeting systems can track. The Ares streaked between the Zorvani vessels like a phantom, its weapons firing with impossible precision. Each shot found a critical system, bypassing shields as if they weren't even there. Shields failing. Engine core breach on the stalwart. We've lost contact with the Dawnbringer. Kex watched in horror as his fleet, the pride of the Hegemony's outer rim forces, came apart around him. The Ares moved like no ship he'd ever seen, its maneuvers defying the laws of physics themselves. Get us out of here, he ordered, but it was too late. A blinding flash filled the view screen. When it cleared, Kex saw the burning hulks of 11 capital ships drifting in space. His flagship was the only vessel still partially functional, and even it was bleeding atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The Ares hung motionless before them, completely undamaged. Its sleek form seemed to mock everything the Hegemony thought they knew about warfare. Incoming transmission, his communications officer whispered. A calm human voice filled the command center. Your attack has been logged. Further hostile actions will be met with appropriate force. We suggest you reconsider your approach to first contact scenarios. The Ares vanished in a burst of light, leaving behind the wreckage of the Hegemony's finest ships and the shattered remains of their military pride. Kex's tentacles drooped as he stared at the devastation. In less than 3 minutes, a single human vessel had destroyed a fleet that could have conquered an entire sector. The implications were terrifying. Send word to the High Council, he managed to say. Tell them we failed, and may the ancestors help us all. As Admiral Kex's shattered fleet limped back to the nearest outpost, the news spread like wildfire. Fear took root in the hearts of even the most battle-hardened officers. But while the military licked its wounds, deep within the archives, a quiet scholar named Rel Oren was about to uncover a secret far older and far more dangerous than the war itself. Rel Oren's fingers trembled as he input his security credentials into the Zorvani Archive's main terminal. The crystalline display flickered to life, bathing his scaled face in a soft blue glow. As second archivist of the Hegemony, he had access to files most citizens would never see. Something's not right, he muttered, his tail twitching nervously. The encounter with the human ship Ares had shaken the entire Hegemony. How could they have missed such a powerful civilization? The answer lay hidden in a corrupted data file from 3 centuries ago. Rel's hearts pounded as he began the decryption process. Ancient survey reports scrolled across his screen, standard exploration data from when the Zorvani first discovered Earth. But then he found it, a hidden addendum marked with the highest security classification. By the first egg, he whispered, his scales paling as he read. The humans hadn't just disappeared, they had deliberately gone dark. The early survey teams had detected massive energy signatures throughout their solar system, signs of unprecedented industrial activity. But instead of expanding outward like most species, humanity had turned inward. They had built something massive. A soft chime interrupted his research. Another terminal activated, displaying a priority message from the Dranic Dominion, the Hegemony's ancient rivals. Their massive empire bordered human space on the opposite side. The message was brief but clear. The Dranics had also encountered human ships. Their military command was divided, Some advocated for an immediate strike before humanity could reveal its full strength, while others urged caution. Rel downloaded the classified files to his secure tablet. The Zorvani needed to know what humanity had been doing during those silent centuries. As he hurried through the archive's crystalline corridors, his mind raced with possibilities. What had the humans built? Why had they hidden for so long? One thing was certain: humanity's sudden emergence was no accident. They had waited, prepared, and chosen this moment to reveal themselves. The question was, why now? In his private office, Rel composed an urgent message to the High Council. They needed to understand that they weren't dealing with some newly spacefaring species. Humanity had been planning something for centuries, hidden from prying eyes. The Dranic message flashed again on his screen. Their military leaders were growing restless, demanding action. If they chose to strike, it could trigger a conflict that would engulf the entire sector. But as Rel studied the ancient survey data, he couldn't shake the feeling that neither the hegemony nor the Dranics truly understood what they were dealing with. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment, and now they were ready to show the galaxy what they had built. Rel Oren barely had time to process the weight of his discovery when a priority alert flashed on his screen. His hands trembled as he opened the transmission. Admiral Thorne had spoken. The humans were no longer a mystery. They were issuing a final, chilling warning. The time for secrecy was over. Fleet Admiral Isaac Thorne stood at the command center of the Ares, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The vast window before him revealed the glittering expanse of space, now dotted with the disabled Zorvani vessels that had dared to challenge them. His steel-gray eyes narrowed as he watched the tactical display. More hegemony ships were gathering at the edge of their sensor range. The Dranics, too, were mobilizing their forces, though they remained just outside the conflict zone. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of preparation. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her console. "Sir, we're detecting increased communications between the Zorvani and Dranic fleets. They appear to be coordinating." Thorne's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes, a mix of determination and what might have been sadness. He'd hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he'd planned for it nonetheless. "Open a channel," he ordered. "All frequencies, all languages." "Channel open, sir." Thorne straightened, his uniform crisp and immaculate. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of humanity's long exile and their inevitable return. "This is not your war. Stay out of our way or be removed." The message was brief, precise, and chilling in its simplicity. He let the words hang in space for a moment before nodding to Lieutenant Chen to close the channel. The bridge crew sat in silent tension, watching their admiral. They knew this wasn't just a threat, it was a promise backed by centuries of preparation. Humanity hadn't spent their time in exile idly. Thorne turned away from the window, his face unreadable as always. But those who knew him best could see the subtle signs of the burden he carried. Every disabled ship, every potential casualty, weighed on him. Yet he knew that sometimes mercy came in the form of a clear warning. He moved to his command chair, settling into it with the practiced ease of someone who had spent a lifetime making impossible decisions. The message had been delivered. Now they would wait to see who was wise enough to heed it. Thorne's words echoed across the stars, carrying a message that left the hegemony shaken. Even as stunned commanders struggled to comprehend their defeat, the rest of the galaxy was already reacting. In darkened war rooms and council chambers, ancient rivalries were set aside, and a desperate alliance began to take shape. Admiral Thorne watched the tactical display as hundreds of new signatures appeared. The Zorvani fleet had grown from a mere battle group to an armada that stretched across 3 sectors. Red dots blinked into existence as more ships dropped out of hyperspace. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen's voice carried a hint of concern. "We're tracking multiple Dranic battlecruisers joining the hegemony forces. The Kalari Consortium has also committed their 3rd fleet." Commander Rivera stepped forward, his dark eyes fixed on the holographic display. They're forming a classic encirclement pattern, 3 distinct battle groups, each with enough firepower to glass a continent. Thorne's expression remained unchanged as he studied the enemy formations. The Zorvani had called in every favor, every alliance they'd built over centuries of dominance. Their golden-hulled dreadnoughts formed the core of the armada, surrounded by the sleek Dranic vessels and the distinctive crystalline ships of the Kalari. Total enemy count? Thorne asked, though he already knew the answer would be unprecedented. 1,347 capital ships, sir, plus support vessels. Chen's fingers flew across her console. They're deploying in attack formations. Energy signatures indicate weapons charging across all vessels. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but there was no mistaking the tension in the air. This was the largest fleet assembly seen in the Outer Rim in recorded history. Message from the Zorvani flagship, sir, Communications Officer Park announced. High Admiral Vex demands our immediate surrender. He says, and I quote, "The combined might of 3 civilizations stands ready to enforce the peace of the hegemony. You have 1 standard hour to power down your systems and prepare for boarding." Thorne allowed himself a small smile. The Zorvani still didn't understand. They saw the Ares as a single powerful warship, a threat to be eliminated. They had no idea what humanity had become during their long absence from galactic affairs. "Sir," Rivera said quietly, "even with our technological advantage, these numbers are exactly what we expected," Thorne finished. The Zorvani were always going to respond this way. Pride and fear make predictable bedfellows. The massive enemy fleet continued to maneuver into position. Their formation was impressive. Layers of overlapping shields and firing solutions that would have overwhelmed any conventional force. Energy readings spiked as weapon systems powered up across the armada. Multiple targeting locks detected, Chen reported. They're coordinating their fire control systems. Estimate full battle readiness in 15 minutes. The Zorvani had done exactly what humanity had predicted they would do. They had gathered their allies, mustered their forces, and prepared to crush what they saw as an upstart species that dared to challenge their authority. "Send acknowledgement of their message," Thorne ordered. No other response. The enemy armada hung in space like a vast net of steel and energy, ready to close in. The combined might of 3 of the most powerful civilizations in known space gathered in one place, preparing to demonstrate why the hegemony had remained unchallenged for so long. Thorne watched as the last few enemy ships took their positions. The trap, they believed, was set. In 1 hour, they would unleash enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. The tactical display updated one final time, showing the complete enemy battle plan. The Zorvani had positioned their heaviest ships at the center, with Dranic warships forming the left flank and Kalari vessels on the right. It was a masterwork of military coordination, a testament to their centuries of experience in warfare. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history stood poised for battle, its might stretching across the void. But as energy readings spiked and weapons locked on target, the human fleet moved, vanishing like ghosts. The first shots were already screaming through space when commanders realized the battlefield itself had become a trap. "Sir?" Lieutenant Chen's voice carried a hint of concern. "We're tracking over 2,000 vessels. Multiple species signatures detected." Admiral Thorne remained motionless, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical display. Around him, the bridge of the Ares hummed with quiet efficiency. "They brought friends," he said softly. "Just as expected." He tapped his command console. "All ships, execute Formation Delta, activate Whisper protocols." Across the void, 30 human vessels shifted positions with practiced precision. To the approaching armada, they must have looked hopelessly outnumbered. The enemy fleet advanced in a classic pincer formation, their weapons charged, shields at maximum. The first salvos, brilliant streaks of energy, crossed the darkness of space and passed right through the human ships. "Holograms," muttered a Zorvani commander. realizing too late. But where? The real human fleet materialized behind the Armada, emerging from quantum displacement fields that had rendered them completely invisible. Not cloaked, not hidden. They had existed in a different phase of reality altogether. All ships execute protocol stillness, Thorne commanded. Waves of invisible energy pulsed outward from the human vessels. Across the enemy fleet, ships suddenly lost power. Weapons went dark. Engines died. Even emergency systems flickered and failed. Quantum nullification field, Lieutenant Chen reported, 98% effective. The mighty Armada drifted helplessly, their advanced technology rendered useless by principles of physics they hadn't even discovered yet. Thorne opened a channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Thorne of the Terran Defense Force. While you were watching us, we were learning. While you plotted, we evolved. The weapons you see today represent 3 centuries of uninterrupted development." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We could destroy your fleet right now. Instead, we offer you this demonstration and a choice. Withdraw, or be disabled permanently. You have 5 minutes to signal your surrender." The quantum nullification field held the enemy fleet in its grip, their ships dark except for emergency lighting. In the command centers of a dozen species, leaders who had never known defeat faced a terrifying new reality. The Zorvani High Commander stared at his dead console, remembering intelligence reports about humanity's long isolation. They hadn't been hiding, he realized. They had been preparing. One by one, ships began broadcasting surrender signals. The Battle of Quiet Void, as it would come to be known, ended without a single shot fired. Thorne watched the surrender signals multiply across his display. "Stand down quantum fields on surrendered vessels only," he ordered. "Maintain displacement coverage of our fleet." "Sir," Chen reported, "the Dranic contingent is withdrawing without surrendering." "Let them go," Thorne said. "They'll spread the word. That's exactly what we want." The Admiral's gaze remained fixed on the tactical display, where thousands of dormant ships floated in the void, a testament to humanity's quantum leap beyond conventional warfare. The galaxy would never be the same. The silence after the battle was deafening. Thousands of ships had been reduced to lifeless husks drifting in space, and the survivors could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. Across the galaxy, leaders and scholars alike pored over the battle footage, searching for answers, but what they found only deepened their fear. In the aftermath of the Battle of Quiet Void, the Zorvani High Council chamber was eerily silent. Watchmaster Valis's hands trembled as he replayed the sensor data for the 5th time. "Impossible," Elder Kral whispered, his scales pale with shock. "Their ships, they simply vanished. 2,000 of our finest vessels, and they—" "Not vanished," Valis corrected, his voice hoarse. "The humans were there the whole time. Our sensors couldn't detect them until it was too late. The technology gap is substantial." In the Dranic war room, Supreme Commander Yara slammed her fist on the table. "How did we miss this? Centuries of surveillance, and we never saw them building these capabilities." Her intelligence chief, a thin figure named Mech, spread out data streams across the holographic display. They stayed in their home systems, appearing primitive, while secretly perfecting technologies we'd never imagined. The energy signatures we recorded, they don't match anything in our databases. Across the galaxy in the Talarian observation post, senior analyst Wren compiled his report with shaking appendages. The human vessels demonstrated complete mastery of gravitational manipulation. They didn't just defeat the combined fleet, they rendered our most advanced weapons completely ineffective. In a secure bunker deep beneath the Zorvani capital, Rel Oren sorted through centuries of historical data with new eyes. "We thought they were isolated," he muttered to his research team. "All those years they spent within their borders. They weren't hiding, they were building, learning, preparing." The Hegemony's Emergency Council gathered in their orbital sanctuary. First Speaker Ven addressed the assembled representatives, their usual pomp and ceremony replaced by naked fear. In a single engagement, humanity has demonstrated technological superiority in every measurable category, Venn said. Their stealth systems made our sensors useless. Their weapons— He paused, struggling to maintain composure. Their weapons bypassed our strongest shields as if they weren't even there. In the Dranic military archives, analysts worked frantically to understand what they'd witnessed. "Look at these readings," one said, pointing to a complex data stream. When their ships reappeared, they weren't using conventional drives. It's like they were bending space itself. The surviving ship captains submitted their reports, each one more disturbing than the last. Tales of weapons that seemed to ignore the laws of physics, defensive systems that made human vessels untouchable, communications that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. "We never stood a chance," a Zorvani fleet commander admitted in his final report before resigning. "They could have destroyed us at any time. They were just giving us a chance to walk away." The various factions that had once dreamed of expanding their territories now huddled in their borders, desperately analyzing every scrap of data from the battle. The humans hadn't just won. They had rewritten the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. In the Talarian archives, an ancient historian drew a surprising conclusion. "They waited," she said to her colleagues. "All these centuries they had the power to expand, to conquer. Instead, they waited until we forced their hand. What does that tell us about their true nature?" While the galaxy reeled from the crushing defeat, Rel Oren worked tirelessly, tracing the remnants of ancient files. He had to know, where had the humans been all this time, and why had they waited until now to return? The truth hidden for centuries was about to come to light. Rel Oren sat in his dimly lit research chamber aboard the Zorvani archive station, surrounded by holographic displays filled with centuries-old data. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he couldn't stop, not when he was finally understanding the truth. "Computer, cross-reference Earth historical records circa 2157, he said, his voice rough from hours of talking to himself. The pieces were falling into place. Humanity hadn't just disappeared. They had chosen to vanish. Rel pulled up an ancient transmission from the human colonial period. "Look at this," he muttered, reading aloud from a recovered message. "Earth command to all colonies. Initiation of Protocol Dark Forest. All communications cease. Maintain radio silence. They're coming." Rel's tentacles twitched with excitement as he dug deeper. The humans had detected something, a threat so severe it had forced them to make an unprecedented decision. They had gone dark, completely dark, cutting off all contact between their worlds. He found fragments of emergency broadcasts. Multiple colony attacks, unknown hostiles, casualties in the millions. "Computer, show me the colony distribution map from 2158 to 2159. The display showed dozens of human colonies winking out, one by one, but not all of them. Some had survived, gone silent, adapted. "They didn't just hide," Rel whispered in awe. "They evolved." More records appeared. Encrypted transmissions between surviving colonies, salvaged from ancient relay stations. The humans had developed new technologies in isolation, driven by desperate necessity. They'd learned to bend light around their ships, to mask their energy signatures, to become invisible not just to sensors, but to the naked eye. Rel found references to something called Project Shadowfall, a complete redesign of human civilization. They had built their cities underground, developed zero-emission technology, and created massive shield systems that could hide entire planets from detection. "That's why we never found them," he said, understanding dawning. "We weren't looking for a civilization that could make itself invisible." The record showed more, how the surviving colonies had slowly, carefully reconnected with each other, using methods so subtle they were almost undetectable. They had shared their advances, strengthened each other, all while maintaining absolute secrecy. "Computer, display the Ares specifications." The ship that had started this crisis wasn't just a warship. It was the product of centuries of hidden development. Every system, every weapon, had been refined through generations of survival and adaptation. Rel sat back, his mind reeling. The humans hadn't just survived, they had turned their exile into an advantage. While the rest of the galaxy's species had developed their technology openly, competing and sharing, humanity had evolved in shadows driven by the need to remain unseen. They had learned to fight not just with weapons but with stealth and misdirection. The Battle of Quiet Void hadn't been a display of superior firepower. It had been a demonstration of warfare that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even comprehend. Computer, save all files to my secure archive. Authorization Orin 79 Delta. The humans had done the impossible. They had not only survived their self-imposed exile, they had mastered it. And now, after centuries of silence, they had chosen to reveal themselves. Rel looked at the final piece of data he had uncovered. A population estimate based on energy readings from supposedly empty sectors of space. The numbers were staggering. The humans hadn't just survived, they had thrived, building an empire in plain sight, invisible to all who didn't know where to look. As Rel stared at the decrypted files, another incoming transmission flashed on his console, this one bearing the insignia of the Dranic Dominion. They had seen what humanity could do, and now they faced a choice that could alter the fate of their people forever. Kren Vashtar stood at the viewport of his command ship, watching the aftermath of the Battle of Quiet Void. Debris from destroyed vessels dotted the starscape like a graveyard of broken dreams. His massive hands, scarred from countless battles, clenched into fists. Supreme Commander, his second-in-command approached cautiously. The War Council awaits your decision. Vashtar's jaw tightened. The Dranic Dominion had always chosen the path of strength, crushing those who stood in their way. But what he'd witnessed in that battle... "Show me the footage again," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing human ships dancing through impossible maneuvers. They hadn't just fought, they'd adapted mid-battle, changing tactics faster than any species he'd ever encountered. They could have destroyed everyone, Vashtar muttered, but they didn't. They disabled ships instead of obliterating them. He remembered Admiral Thorne's message. This is not your war. Stay out of our way or be removed. Not conquered, not destroyed, removed. The distinction gnawed at him. A memory surfaced from his youth, his first instructor teaching him about strength. True power, the old warrior had said, is knowing when not to strike. Vashtar turned to face his waiting officers. The humans, he began, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. They've survived alone, hidden, building something we never imagined possible. They didn't seek conquest when they could have had it. But, sir, one of his officers protested, our way has always been... Our way, Vashtar cut him off, has led us here, watching our allies' ships turned to scrap by an enemy that showed more restraint than we ever have. He walked to the tactical display, pointing to the battle data. Look at their precision, their efficiency. This isn't just strength, it's strength with purpose. The choice weighed on him like a physical burden. Everything he'd been taught said to fight, to prove Dranic superiority through combat. But everything he'd seen showed him a different kind of strength, one that had kept humanity alive and thriving while hiding from the galaxy's powers. Send a message to Admiral Thorne, Vashtar commanded, his decision crystallizing. Tell him the Dranic Dominion recognizes strength when we see it. We choose to stand with humanity. The Dranic decision sent ripples through the fragile coalition. Some saw it as betrayal, others as wisdom, but no one could deny that the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. And as battle fleets repositioned themselves, it became clear the war was about to reach its final, decisive moment. The combined fleet of the coalition stretched as far as the eye could see, Zorvani dreadnoughts, Dranic warships, and vessels from a dozen other species. Over 10,000 ships in total, the largest armada ever assembled in known space. Admiral Kress of the Zorvani stood on her bridge, watching tactical displays light up with countless signals. This ends today. They cannot stand against our united strength. The human fleet appeared suddenly, just 30 ships led by the now infamous Ares. They seemed absurdly outnumbered. All ships commence attack pattern Delta, Kress commanded. Overwhelm them with volume of fire. The coalition fleet surged forward like a tidal wave of metal and energy. Weapons blazed across space, tens of thousands of energy beams, missiles, and projectiles creating a wall of destruction that nothing could survive. But the human ships moved with impossible precision, weaving through the barrage as if they could see the future. Not a single shot connected. Impossible, Kress whispered. No crew can react that fast. The Ares and its escorts accelerated to speeds that shouldn't have been possible. Their hulls glowed with strange energy that seemed to bend space itself around them. Then humanity revealed their true power. Reality itself seemed to twist as massive gravitational distortions erupted throughout the coalition fleet. Hundreds of ships were suddenly crushed into balls of compressed metal. Others were torn apart as localized space-time anomalies shredded their hulls. By the gods, someone screamed on the bridge, they're weaponizing gravity itself. The human vessels moved like ghosts through the chaos, their weapons cutting through supposedly impenetrable shields like they didn't exist. Each shot found its mark with surgical precision. Admiral Kress watched in horror as her mighty armada began to disintegrate. Ships were being destroyed faster than she could track. The coalition's carefully planned formations collapsed into panic. "Fall back," she ordered. "All ships retreat." But it was too late. The human fleet had already divided their forces into killing zones. There was nowhere to run. In less than 20 minutes, over 8,000 coalition vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder fled in terror, their crews broken by what they'd witnessed. Admiral Thorne's voice echoed across all frequencies. "Let this be our final warning. The age of your dominance is over. Adapt to this new reality, or cease to exist." Kress slumped in her command chair, watching the human ships disappear as quickly as they'd arrived. Their overwhelming victory had been so complete, so absolute, that it defied comprehension. The coalition's last greatest effort had failed, and with it died any illusion that humanity could be defeated through conventional means. The coalition had gambled everything on one final assault, and they had lost. Their broken fleets drifted in silence, the weight of their failure undeniable. And as the dust settled, humanity made its next move. Not as conquerors, but as something far more daunting. They were here to stay. The human fleet materialized from hyperspace like a steel thunderstorm. Not the thousands of ships the coalition had expected, but a mere 100 vessels. Each one was massive, angular, and purpose-built for war. Their hulls gleamed with a dark metallic sheen that seemed to drink in the starlight. The flagship, a colossal vessel that dwarfed even the largest Zorvani dreadnought, moved to the center of their formation. Its name was emblazoned across the bow in bold letters, Terra Invicta. Admiral Kress felt her mandibles twitch nervously. Why so few ships? This must be a trick. The human vessels maintained perfect formation, unnaturally still in the void. Then, every communication channel across every frequency burst into life simultaneously. The message came in crystal clear, transmitted in all known languages of the coalition species. "I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Human Federation. For centuries we chose isolation, rebuilding from near extinction after the Great Collapse. We watched, we learned, and we prepared. Your unprovoked aggression against our scout ship Ares has forced our hand." The Admiral's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that made even the battle-hardened Dranic commanders shift uncomfortably. "We do not seek war. We do not want your territories. But make no mistake, we will defend ourselves with absolute resolve. The UHF hereby announces its presence as a sovereign power in this galaxy. Any further acts of aggression will be met with overwhelming force." To emphasize her point, the human ships activated their defense systems. Layers of energy fields shimmed into existence around their vessels, technologies that the Coalition's sensors couldn't even begin to comprehend. You have a choice. Lower your weapons and open diplomatic channels, or learn firsthand why humanity survived its darkest hours. You have 5 minutes to decide. The Coalition command channel erupted into chaos. Some demanded immediate attack, others called for retreat, and a few wise voices urged negotiation. Admiral Kress stared at the human fleet, remembering the devastating losses at the Battle of Quiet Void. Those had been just 2 human ships. Now they faced 50 times that number. She opened a channel to all Coalition forces. Stand down weapons. We will not fire first. A collective breath seemed to release across the Armada as gun ports closed and targeting systems powered down. The time for war had passed. The galaxy would never be the same. The Terra Invicta's response was immediate. A wise choice. Let us begin discussions about humanity's peaceful integration into the galactic community. We have much to share and much to learn from each other. The United Human Federation had announced their presence not with a bang, but with an offer of peace, backed by unshakable strength. The message was clear. Humanity had returned to the stars, not as conquerors but as equals who would not be trifled with. With the war at an end, the old powers scrambled to retain their influence. Some sought peace, others plotted revenge, but for Watchmaster Valis, the choice had already been made. As he stared at the orders from the High Council, he realized he could no longer serve a government that refused to evolve. Watchmaster Valis stood at his command post, watching the tactical display with growing unease. The Coalition fleet, nearly 3,000 ships strong, hung in space like a swarm of angry insects. Yet his attention kept returning to the human vessels, their clean lines and purposeful design speaking of centuries of refinement. "Sir, the High Council demands we commit to the attack," his second-in-command reported, voice tight with tension. Valis didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pulled up the historical archives on his display. 5 centuries of Zorvani dominance scrolled before him. Unchanged, unevolving, stagnant. The same ships, the same tactics, the same rigid thinking that had kept them in power. "Look at them," he said softly, gesturing to the human fleet. "No wasted movement, no unnecessary ornament. Everything serves a purpose." "Sir?" "We've been fool's gold," Valis continued, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "Shining on the surface, hollow underneath. For centuries we've confused dominance with strength." He turned to face his crew, seeing the confusion in their postures. "The hegemony hasn't advanced in generations. We've been so busy maintaining control that we forgot how to grow, how to adapt." A priority message flashed on his screen, direct orders from the High Council to lead the vanguard assault. Valis stared at it for a long moment, then deliberately pressed delete. "Sir, that's treason," his second gasped. "No," Valis replied, straightening to his full height. "Treason would be leading our people into destruction because we're too proud to admit we're wrong." He opened a channel to his battle group, 30 ships that had served with him for years. "All vessels, this is Watchmaster Valis. The hegemony has lost its way. I will not sacrifice your lives to preserve a system that values control over progress." He paused, watching as confusion rippled through the Coalition fleet. His ships were already breaking formation, pulling away from the main force. "Humanity isn't our enemy," he continued. "They're a mirror, showing us what we've become and what we could be. I choose adaptation over extinction. Any who wish to join me, form up on my position. The rest of you, I wish you well." The bridge fell silent as his words hung in space. Then, one by one, acknowledgement signals began flooding in, not just from his battle group, but from other Zorvani commanders who had served with him who had seen the same truth he had. "You're making a mistake," his second-in-command said quietly. "The hegemony will never forgive this." Valis turned to the tactical display, watching as nearly 100 ships broke away to join his position. The hegemony's forgiveness stopped mattering the moment they chose pride over survival. He opened a channel to the human fleet. "This is Watchmaster Valis of the former Zorvani Battle Group Stalwart Dawn. We request permission to stand down and open dialogue." The Coalition's remaining forces launched their desperate attack, but the battle was over before it had even begun. The humans didn't fight, they dismantled. Every strategy, every weapon, every desperate maneuver fell apart before them. And as the old order crumbled, a new power stood in its place. The massive Coalition fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing across the void. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes lit up space like a deadly light show. But something was wrong. Valis could feel it in his bones. Fleet Admiral Isaac Thorne's voice cut through all channels, calm and measured. "You were warned." The human ships moved with impossible precision, breaking formation in ways that defied conventional tactics. Valis watched in awe as the smaller human vessels slipped between Coalition lines like water through fingers. "By the stars," Valis whispered, his four eyes widening as the human fleet executed a maneuver he'd never seen before. Their ships seemed to dance around the Coalition's clumsy attempts to trap them, always one step ahead. The first wave of Coalition ships erupted in silent explosions, clean hits, surgical strikes that targeted vital systems, no wasted shots, no collateral damage. This wasn't just combat, it was art. Through the command channel, Valis heard the panic spreading. "They're inside our formation. Can't get a lock. Shield generators failing. How are they moving like that?" On his tactical display, Thorne's flagship cut through the chaos like a knife. Coalition ships scattered before it, but there was nowhere to run. The human vessels had somehow encircled them, creating a deadly net that grew tighter by the second. "All ships fall back." The Coalition commander's voice cracked with desperation. But it was too late. The human fleet's synchronized attack turned space into a graveyard of broken ships and scattered debris. Vessels that had proudly served for centuries were reduced to drifting hulks in minutes. The Coalition's mighty armada, assembled from the combined strength of 6 species, crumbled before Thorne's forces like sand castles before a tide. Valis watched as the last pockets of resistance were systematically eliminated. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating an overwhelming superiority that made the Coalition's best ships look like children's toys. When the final Coalition destroyer tried to make a break for hyperspace, a single human cruiser caught it with a precision shot that disabled its engines. The message was clear. There would be no escape. In less than an hour, the greatest fleet the Coalition had ever assembled was reduced to floating debris. The human ships hung in formation, barely scratched, their power cores still running at optimal levels. They hadn't even needed to exert themselves fully. Fleet Admiral Thorne's voice came through once more, still as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "Let this serve as a reminder. We asked for peace. Remember why you didn't choose it." With their military dominance shattered, the Coalition's leaders had only one choice left: survival. As the Galactic Council convened, eyes turned to humanity. What would they demand? Conquest? Submission? Instead, Admiral Thorne gave them something far more unsettling: a choice. Admiral Thorne's hologram stood before the gathered representatives of the surviving Coalition species. His uniform was simple, lacking the ornate decorations common among alien military leaders. Behind him, Earth's blue sphere hung in space, a reminder of humanity's home. "Your civilizations have grown comfortable," Thorne said, his voice carrying no malice, only certainty. "You've forgotten how to adapt, how to push boundaries." Valis stood among the delegates, noting how the proud Zorvani High Council members seemed smaller now. The Dranic ambassadors' scales had lost their usual luster. "We did not come to conquer," Thorne continued. "We came to wake you up." Rel Oren stepped forward, his research data pads clutched in his trembling hands. "During our studies of human history, we found something remarkable. Your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet each crisis made you stronger." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Vashtar, the warrior poet, nodded slowly. "While we built walls around our territories, they built bridges to the stars." Thorn's hologram gestured and a series of images appeared. Human colonies thriving on hostile worlds, massive engineering projects that dwarfed anything the Coalition had attempted in centuries. "We offer you a choice," Thorn said. "Join us in pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Share in the knowledge we've gained. Help us explore the unknown reaches of space." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Or maintain your rigid hierarchies and stagnant traditions. The choice is yours." The Zorvani High Chancellor stepped forward, his ceremonial robes now seeming more like a burden than a symbol of authority. "And if we choose not to change? Then we'll leave you to your territories," Thorn replied simply. "But the galaxy is evolving. Those who refuse to adapt will find themselves relics of a bygone era." Valis looked around the chamber, seeing the truth of Thorn's words reflected in every face. The Coalition's defeat hadn't just been military, it had been philosophical. They had been outthought, not just outfought. "We've already begun dismantling the old power structures of the hegemony," Valis announced, drawing surprised looks from his former masters. "We choose evolution." One by one, other representatives stood, making their choice. Not all. Some turned and left the chamber, clinging to their old ways. But enough remained to mark the beginning of something new. Thorn smiled, a genuine expression that carried hope rather than triumph. "Then let's begin." As the first official diplomatic talks began, a realization swept through the gathered species. This was no longer a galaxy ruled by conquest and control. It was a galaxy on the precipice of a new age. And whether they liked it or not, humanity had already begun to shape its future. The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly fell silent as Admiral Thorn stepped onto the speaking platform. The curved walls, adorned with the banners of 100 species, seemed to hold their breath. Representatives from across known space filled the tiered seats, their expressions ranging from fear to curiosity. "I stand before you today," Thorn began, his voice clear and steady, "to formally announce the presence of the United Human Federation in galactic affairs." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A Zorvani delegate's facial crystals flickered with anxiety. Behind Thorn, a massive hologram materialized, showing the extent of human space, far larger than anyone had suspected. Blue dots marked human worlds, connected by lines representing their FTL network. The display caused several delegates to rise from their seats in shock. "For 3 centuries we chose isolation," Thorn continued. "We built. We learned. We evolved. Not through genetic manipulation or cybernetic enhancement, but through understanding, adaptation, and unity." Watchmaster Valis, now wearing the simple gray uniform of an independent observer, nodded slowly. He'd seen firsthand what humanity had achieved. "The United Human Federation extends an open hand to all species willing to embrace progress," Thorn said, spreading his arms. "We offer trade, cultural exchange, and technological cooperation. But understand this, we will not tolerate aggression. The old ways of conquest and subjugation end today." The chamber's central display showed recordings from the Battle of Quiet Void, human ships dancing through space with impossible grace, weapons that bent reality itself, defensive systems that made their vessels nearly untouchable. "We are not your conquerors," Thorn's voice softened. "We are not your enemies. We are your wake-up call." A Dranic representative stood, his scaled skin catching the light. "And if we refuse your invitation?" Thorn's expression remained neutral. "Then you may continue as you are, within your current borders. But the galaxy is changing. Those who cannot adapt will find themselves left behind." The Assembly's leader, a tall Meridian with iridescent wings, approached the central podium. Her voice rang out. "Let the record show that on this day, the United Human Federation is officially recognized as a sovereign power within known space." The declaration hung in the air like a physical thing. Centuries of isolation had ended. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, not as supplicants or conquerors, but as harbingers of change. In the gallery, Rel Oren clutched his data tablet, recording every moment. The pieces of humanity's puzzle finally fit together. Their disappearance, their silent preparation, their return. This wasn't just a new chapter in galactic history. It was the beginning of a new book entirely. With the Galactic Assembly's recognition of the United Human Federation, the old ways had officially come to an end. Some would resist, others would embrace change, but one thing was certain. The era of isolation was over. Humanity had returned and the stars would never be the same again. Behind Thorn, a massive holographic display illuminated the chamber, showing the technological marvels humanity had achieved during their centuries of isolation. Ships that could bend space itself, cities that floated among the stars, and energy systems that harnessed the power of dying suns. Watchmaster Valis, now standing among the human delegation, observed the stunned faces of his former allies. His crystalline features caught the light as he turned to study the Dranic representatives, their scaled faces impossible to read. For centuries, Thorn continued, we chose isolation. We built. We learned. We evolved. What you witnessed at the Battle of Quiet Void was but a fraction of what humanity has become. The hegemony's prime speaker rose, his ceremonial robes rustling. You cannot simply appear and demand. We demand nothing, Thorn interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. We offer a choice, a partnership. The galaxy as you knew it, rigid, hierarchical, stagnant, that galaxy died the moment the Ares entered your space. Rel Oren, seated in the observer's section, clutched her data tablet tighter. The classified files she'd uncovered had only hinted at humanity's true capabilities. Now, watching their public revelation, she understood why her hands trembled. Trade routes will be redrawn, Thorn explained, gesturing to the holographic maps floating behind him. Technology will advance at rates you never imagined possible. Species that were once subjugated will rise to equal standing. A Vashtar representative stood, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. The Vashtar Collective welcomes this change. We have long awaited a breaking of the old ways. More delegates began to rise. First a few, then dozens. The chamber hummed with a new energy, a mix of fear and hope and possibility. The galaxy will never be the same again, Thorn declared, his words echoing through the vast chamber. You can resist this change and be left behind, or embrace it and help us forge a new era. The choice is yours. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and warning. In that moment, every being in the chamber knew they were witnessing the end of one age and the birth of another. If you enjoyed the story of Helena, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.